Good morning, everyone. Hello. We're so glad to see all of you with us today, opening the Considering Violence conference. My name is Professor Pilpul, and together with Jad Kadan and Ido Fuchs, we are delighted to invite some of the people who made this conference possible and to honor us with their presence and offer their opening remarks for this conference. So first, I'd like to invite Professor Millete Shamir, Vice President of Tel-Aviv University.
Thanks very much, Ofe, and good morning, everyone. It's my great pleasure to extend a warm welcome on behalf of Tel-Aviv University to all of you who gathered here today. As Vice President responsible for international academic collaboration, I'm truly delighted to see this conference on violence bring together researchers not only from an impressive array of disciplines, but also from diverse parts of the world. We at Tel-Aviv University regard the fostering of global conversation and engagement as one of our primary strategic goals. And conferences such as this one model the kind of international conversation that we believe in, that we value, and that we promote. Of course, when it comes to considering violence, a multidisciplinary, multicultural, and multinational conversation is not merely nice to have. It's an absolute necessity, given the tremendous complex nature of the topic that you decided to tackle here together. Today, discourses of violence have proliferated immensely, not only discourses that are violent, and a particularly vexing effect of social fragmentation and political polarization in so many places around the world, but also discourses, and here I'm thinking primarily of social media, discourses that seek to identify violence, to reveal its presence, and to fight against it. The problem with the latter, as I see it, is that they tend to flatten and reify violence, reducing it to a single catch-all phenomenon and often hiding from sight both the multivalence and the gradations of violence. As we know, violence takes an immense variety of forms and stretches over a very long continuum of severity and magnitude from the most intimate to the most global. Microaggression in the office is a form of violence, but it is not easily comparable and not productively comparable to, say, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. In lumping very disparate forms of violence together, popular discourses on violence risk deadening our sensibilities and sowing confusion about what violence is and how it should be countered. With this in mind, I think that it's a pressing challenge of academia to introduce complexity and nuance into broad and popular discussions of violence. Consider, for instance, the widely popular theory proposing that a global decrease in violence has occurred over recent decades. Researchers such as Steven Pinker and more recently Yuval Noah Harari have presented evidence showing a consistent decrease in warfare, homicide, and even violence against women to prove what is now often referred to as the long decline of violence. But as skeptics correctly argue, we can only accept this theory if we adopt a limited and a reified understanding of what violence is, overlooking the over-invisible, structural, and systemic violence caused by social, economic, and political factors such as poverty, discrimination, and inequality. Violence isn't a concrete entity that either exists or doesn't exist, that is either on the rise or on the fall, but a complex and often hidden network of practices, actions, and events that cannot be properly understood without expert analysis and intervention. And for that task, we need not just have the tools of a variety of disciplines, but also comparativist, layered perspective created by a multicultural and a transnational conversation. So the conference that we're opening this morning, offering a consideration, as the title puts it, and I'm sure also a reconsideration of violence across fields and across social and cultural contexts, holds, in my opinion, great promise. I would like to express my deepest thanks to the organizers and also my admiration for those of the organizers that are graduate students and have really led the way. So many thanks to Ido Fuchs, to Jad Kadan, to Ofes Sinuf Pipul, and also to the faculty that accompanied them, Amal, Jamal, Galili, Shahar, and Ariel Handel, who did such a wonderful work in putting this rich program together. I would like to extend my appreciation to all participants who will be presenting here in the next 2 days, especially those who've traveled a great distance to be with us here in Tel Aviv. I wish you all 2 days filled with thought-provoking discussions and meaningful insights. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Millete. Now I would like to invite a good friend and partner of us, Professor Amal Jamal, the head of the Walter-Lebach Institute for the Study of Jewish-Arab Coexistence at Tel-Aviv University.
Good morning, everybody. I'm very glad to be here again in this room where interesting conferences take place. I would like to start with a few words of gratitude, of course, and thanking for the organizing committee, Olfe, Ido, and Jad, who actually were a very inspiring force behind this initiative, and I hope that it's a good beginning for a much better future addressing pressing issues that don't engage only the Israeli society but worldwide, as Professor Shamir said. I would like also to thank Galili Shahar, and I would like to thank Hinde for their contribution of this organizing this conference. And I would like to thank somebody who is not here, who was also behind the scenes working hard to make it happen, Inat Moore, who is touring southern England now, left us for an MA in Holland. But she worked very hard with you guys in order to guarantee the success of this conference. Bana Haj Yahya is here. She replaced her, and she is taking part in making you satisfied with drinks and food and whatever. Of course, she's a graduate student of Tel Aviv University in the School of Culture here, studying Arabic literature. I have a lot to say about the content of the conference, but since I'm going to be speaking twice, later today and tomorrow, so I'm not gonna, share with you substantial ideas about violence. I think it's a very timely conference. It's a very important to address this topic, this huge topic of violence. And as we all know, I think one of the major engagements of political philosophers through history is dealing with violence, or actually trying to deal with violence, proposing certain ways to cure violence and pacify society. So the dialectics between violence and pacification become a very crucial issue to look at in order to understand how human society is developing and where it's heading. And as Professor Shamir said, violence is not only physical violence or what could be captured in with empirical eyes or empirical means. I think violence is much deeper embedded in human society. It's part of the human psyche. It's a normal phenomenon that has to be taken into consideration. And when we look at all societies worldwide and through history, there's no society that was able to overcome violence, whatever we mean with it, unless it used violent means, which is an intellectual reduction. Only by violent means you can overcome violence, something I'll address in my talk later on. And therefore, how to regulate violence, how to deal with violence, what kind of violence, how we define violence, and so on is very important issue to look at over this conference. Participants in this conference will share with us their ideas, their opinions, their engagement with the topic. And I wish you all a fruitful conference during these 2 days, hoping that it's going to be, only a
Could
start.
someone please unmute the audio? I'm not getting any sound. With Jonathan?
So you missed everything I said. I'm going to repeat everything now.
I'm so sorry. Sorry.
Thank you.
Okay. The last thing I would like to say is that I'll try my best to be with you all time. Having other responsibilities on this campus, I will have to leave here and there. So my apology from the start. I wish you a wonderful and engaging conference, and I'll see you around. We'll talk during the breaks. I have to apologize also for not being able to be with you during dinner because I live in the north, and I have to travel back and come back tomorrow early. So my apology from now. Okay? Have a nice day.
Thank you, Amal. Last but not least, I'm very happy to invite Professor Galili Shahar, head of the Program for Jodeo-Arabic Cultural Studies at Tel-Aviv University.
Thank you, Ofer. Good morning, dear friends and colleagues. So we are indeed delighted to welcome you. Scholars who arrived from abroad, from a distance, and also from nearby to join the conference considering violence. It is a great honor to host and to serve fellows and guests, dear friends, to discuss and rethink this question, the forms and implications of violence. As you know, hosting itself, the act of hospitality, that is friendship, the opening of the house or here of the hall, the shaking of hands, the laughter, the joyful gathering, as we are all, is not always free itself from acts of hostility. The oath provides hostage. There is a double binding of meanings, ambiguities in this very act of welcoming. Invitation that turns into an act of housing, a shelter, of course, yet a capturing. The ambiguities of this act of welcoming, the gesture of the host, refers perhaps to this core meaning of violence. That is a presence, a power, a strength of prevailing. In Hebrew, srara. The German word Gewalt captures the meaning too, referring to the power of prevailing, a resource of sovereignty and of authority. The verb walten implies this being, to prevail, to rule, this role. It calls us to attend the domestic, already gathered, uncanny, gendered implications of hospitality as an act of violence being embedded in welcoming. Different, however, ambiguities of balance and of hospitality are hidden in the Hebrew word alimut itself. It implies what the Latin word and its vernacular versions of violence refer to: aggression, attacks, act of destruction, injury. Yet it also holds a significant reference to the very act of gathering. It is the Hebrew word aluma, referring to a tie, a bonding, a joining, a guda, namely association. The Hebrew name for violence holds together, refers to a gathering, a community like ours. Our seminar, this conference, in its very act of joining together, this gathering, is an act of violence. Not alone the power of thinking, the strength of language, the force of the word, but first the fact of this meeting, hosting each other, associating ourselves, is already violence. What is meant here is not to argue that thoughts, words, names are powerful. We know it. This is not simply to say what we know well, that the act of language implies strength. It's not to remind us alone that critique or critical theory implies judgment, Urteilung in German, a painful separation, a rupture in Hebrew, mashber. It is rather a minor reminder that violence, again, alimut, once we listen again to its ambiguities, as expressed also in Hebrew, as we said, holds a political resource, a potential which is never pure, but always anchored in distress, in pain, in states of repression. This is what thought and critique is all about. Yet one cannot imagine freedom, the being of free spirits, beautiful minds, the joy of thinking, the symposium, without that power, somewhat demonic, prevailing, namely the existence of us. Considering violence, the title of this gathering, calls us to engage in thinking by arguments, by concepts and words, of course. We are, all the sons and daughters of language. In dialogues too, right? It's also about that. Sorry. Right. It is not only the power of thoughts, ideas, and words, but rather the very fact that we sit here, the very fact that we sit here in a certain local, right? In a certain local Israeli-Palestinian constellation, let's call them like that, and we are very much aware that asking about violence is not without dealing with our constellations as such, violent themselves, which are not separated also from planetary associations, right? While being aware also of their colonial conditions still prevailing. It invites us to look at, to listen to voices, visions, and effects of violence and its bodies engraved by force, wounded, silent. There is in Hebrew elem, which is not separated from this consideration of violence. It's always about acts of silence too. So considering violence is thus demanding, a difficult task that involves self-reflection, engagement that is never free from the pain of thinking, responding to what we are, being in violence. But this too is left for us. And one cannot think of a better, more proper intellectual setting and task as this one, as Millete and Amal already said. And at that hour. Considering violence means considering ourselves, our existence together. So once again, welcome. With your permission, a few words of gratitude to my colleagues and friends, Ido Fuchs, Jad Ka'adan, Orfe Sanuk Pilpul, Ariel Andel, and Amal Jamal, Millete Shamir, to their vision and planning, Michal Bondi for assistance. My thanks also go to the Walter-Lebach Institute for the Study of Jewish-Arab Existence and its chair, Professor Amal Jamal, and its team for his friendship and cooperation. Professor Millete Shamir, the chair of the Office of the Vice President for International Affairs, for a generous support. We also thank the Conference Committee of the Research Authority at the University for its generous contribution, and to my colleagues in the program of Jodeo-Arabic Studies for inspiring us, and to you who accept our invitation to attend and contribute. Good luck.
Thank you very much, Professor Millete Shamir, Professor Amal Jamal, and Professor Galili Shahar. For our opening workshop, I would like to invite Dr. Ariel Handel. Thank you very much.